The Raptors were up 16 points against the Chicago Bulls in the fourth quarter, and they blew it, losing in overtime. It was a wild one. Let's go to the film room. You might have your tinfoil hat on talking about tanking, the perfect tank, basically describing why the Raptors executed the most ethical tank there is to have. But ultimately, this meltdown that the Raptors had comes down to one major issue, and that was not having Jakob Poeltl in the clutch. Here are just a few possessions of great Jakob Poeltl basketball, recognizing the mismatch in transition, finishing, the screening ability for Scottie Barnes. Watch the Gortat screen here to get him a easy look at the basket. And just to show that again, the Gortat screen is when the big man seals off the other big man to open up the lane. No player on the team benefits from Jakob's presence more than Immanuel Quickley. Pick and roll here, and he uses it, rejects it, and then gets downhill, finds Scottie for the alley-oop. Here, actually uses the Jakob screen, off ball, flares out, knocks down the three. And so all those possessions are really good offensive possessions early in the fourth quarter that helped the Raptors get out to a 16-point lead. Now, Jakob Poeltl was on a minute restriction. Jakob Poeltl is probably one of the most impactful, if not maybe the second most impactful other than Scottie Barnes in terms of winning minutes on this Raptors team. The reason is because there's a pretty big drop-off in the big man category for the Raptors. They don't have anybody who can screen as well as he can. And while Orlando Robinson did a valiant job, Jonathan Mobo is still learning and figuring out his place and is not 7 feet tall. It really impacted the Raptors' crunch time offense, and it led to a couple of ugly possessions. Possessions like this, where RJ can't create separation and Immanuel Quickley has to let the heave go. And while they got a decent shot out of this one, Quickley is moving and in motion, and it's a pretty tough look fading right. One-on-one situation here with Scottie, and honestly, I didn't hate this look. I thought it was a good look for him, just rimmed out. Still, it would have been great to have a Jakob screen there to open up space for him. Raptors actually get the Bulls defense in rotation here, but the advantage is nullified, and it forces Grady into a tough shot, which he makes. They did find some success running these dribble handoff actions for RJ Barrett to get downhill, but they ultimately just couldn't capitalize in the clutch, with Quickley missing this wide open shot that would have been the nail in the coffin, basically. This is a tough possession to finish the fourth quarter. Scottie kind of rushes into a fadeaway jump shot, and look, ultimately, like, these are good reps for them to figure out how they want to be in these moments, but a guy like Brandon Ingram will certainly help in those moments as a guy who has been a tough shot maker and a tough shot taker. So you don't necessarily have to have Scottie being that guy, or Quick being that guy, or RJ being that guy. They can be those guys in moments, in stretches, but I think ultimately when you have a guy like BI, he's going to be able to alleviate some of that pressure off of these guys when it comes to the clutch moments. If the Raptors had BI and Jakob, I don't think they would have been in that situation in this game. And in overtime, it was even worse. There was just not a lot of creation juice from the Raptors generally. And there were a few mistakes, very, very clear mistakes. The Immanuel Quickley foul on Kobe White. There was the travel call on RJ Barrett earlier in this game. But in overtime, not a lot of great creation. So here, Immanuel Quickley tries to get to the basket, just gets stonewalled, doesn't get an easy look. The Bulls just end up switching these RJ Barrett actions, and so RJ doesn't get that lane to get downhill. Scottie was making his fadeaways a couple times, but just couldn't knock down this one. And then Grady just gets stonewalled at the basket on this drive. And that's all she wrote, folks. So I think it was a two-part equation. Like, I know everybody's going to say it was the ethical tank. Truthfully, dude, I mean, when I was watching it, I'm like, man, they are pulling off one of the most ethical tank jobs I've ever seen. I mean, they didn't play Jakob Poeltl. That's the important part here, is the fact that Jakob was on a minute restriction. He ended up playing 22 minutes, I believe, in this game. Did not play in that home stretch in the fourth quarter. Did not play in overtime. Raptors went with Orlando Robinson and Jonathan Mobo. That's clearly because of injury, but at the same time, it certainly helps the tank. There's no denying that. And I think ultimately this was such a bizarre circumstance where the Raptors were up 16 points. They were up 16 points and ended up losing this. An utter collapse. Now, part of that was the basketball equation of things. But I don't think, like, I know this. The players don't tank. The coaching staff does not tank. These guys aren't going out there and seeing like, okay, what's the worst lineup we could possibly put out there? That's not how the like professional athletes and professional coaches work. That's not how it works. Um, but I do think there like generally this was a bit of a situation where the tank benefited them because Jakob was on a minute restriction with the injuries. And so they were forced into a situation where they couldn't play Jakob, which was one of their most impactful players when it came to fourth quarter. Um, that's pretty much the situation at hand right now. That being said, it's kind of it's a precarious time for the Raptors lottery odd wise. Joel Embiid was just ruled out for the rest of the season. Jalen Suggs is out indefinitely. Losing to the Bulls tonight pretty much assured that the Bulls would make the play-in and that the Raptors would not be able to make the play-in. Uh, but there are some different things to that aspect because maybe the Raptors make a run. They have a couple of really easy games here coming up. Orlando struggling right now, like I said, with Jalen Suggs indefinitely out. They have Utah and Washington coming up as well. So some pretty easy games to stack up here. But this one was an important one for the play-in race. If there's anybody on the play-in territory right now and saying, hey, we should go for the play-in, this was an important game to win. And so the Raptors didn't do that. That's why there are the ethical tankers out there saying this was the perfect tank job, really, because what a wild just disaster of a fourth quarter and overtime for this Raptors team. And again, I think there is a basketball explanation for that, which I just tried to explain. Missing the screening ability of Jakob Poeltl, a lot of errors from some of their young guys, and especially their young stars going through the motions of figuring out so just some of the smaller stuff in those moments. But still, stuff that ends up in the win column or in the loss column. And tonight, it was a loss for the Toronto Raptors. Folks, as always, I actually don't have much else to say. I mean, there were cool moments. Jacoby Walter had a few cool moments. Orlando Robinson played well. Overall, I was here ready to come and tell you guys, like, you know what? This was a good game. Scotty had a couple of good moments. I thought he was really effective against the lack of size that Chicago had overall. So he was getting to the basket more often. He was looking to finish around the basket more often. Jakob, in general, made life easier on everybody. RJ Barrett had a really great passing game overall, proving his playmaking ability. Grady Dick started the game off making some big shots. Emmanuel Quickly, before the fourth quarter, was great in terms of shooting. So overall, like, I was ready to come in here and say, hey, look, this was a good game. The Raptors did this. This is the potential with them as a starting unit. And I'm kind of bewildered by by the collapse. And I ultimately just think there's kind of two ways to approach this. It's like, look, the Raptors didn't put themselves in a position to win this game because of the Jakob Poeltl minute restriction, and because of a few bonehead plays, especially the Emmanuel Quickly foul, RJ Barrett traveling, just stuff like that that really let the Bulls get into this one. The Raptors had tons of turnovers in this game too, which let the Bulls get back into it. And so they didn't play the greatest game, but they were clearly the better team for the most part of this game. For probably like 36 minutes of this basketball game, maybe more, like 40 minutes of this basketball game, the Raptors were the better team. It's just that they couldn't close it out. And that's been the case throughout this season. And the fact that that happened to them now technically fully healthy without Brandon Ingram, I think it shows you what BI can bring to this team and the talent that he can bring in terms of shot making and shot taking for this Raptors team. How he'll be able to alleviate pressure off of Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, and RJ Barrett. And for the tankers out there, congratulations, folks. I mean, I feel like everybody is now we know the situation. The cards are on the table, folks. You got to make sure that Philly doesn't get ahead of them. This is the key. I don't want to talk about it, but I just want to mention it real quick. Can't let the Philadelphia 76ers out-tank you. Can't. Would be a disaster, in my opinion. Just because you're not in a position where you can be like, right now, they're fifth best odds. Philly would jump them, and they would be sixth best odds. Brooklyn is losing like crazy too. So now you're in a position where you might go from 6th to 8th, and that would be a disaster situation for this team. Not because of the talent or whatever. They have some great talent. We've talked about it all season. But for an outcome for this season and how terrible this season has been from a wins and loss category, for them to walk away from this year with the 8th best lottery odds would not be good. Would not be good. Would not be a good outcome. 5 is like great. 4 is what you should be gunning for. And they're like, let's see, they're 2 games back of 8th from New Orleans, who has 16 wins, and the Raptors have 18 wins. We'll see what happens. It's a long season. We're just entering March. We still got 6 weeks of basketball, folks. As always, Ethical Tank. Subscribe to the Raptors Republic YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys as always. And thank you very much for tapping into Raptors Republic. See you guys for the next one, folks. Peace out.